This is an oral history interview conducted for the Witness to War Serving a Nation project at Nauset Regional High School on Cape Cod, Massachusetts. For the sake of this interview, please state your full name and community in which you reside.
Meaghan O'Connell, and I live in Plymouth.
Thank you.
So did you originally live on Cape Cod when you were younger?
I did. I grew up in Mashpee in Osterville, and I lived on the Cape till I was 15.
What were your best childhood memories?
The beach. Love the beach, still love the beach. And Cape Cod is always a nice place to, you could go outside and play as a kid and run around. There was nothing to worry about, so it was a nice place to grow up.
Do you remember seeing anything about earlier wars on TV?
A little bit. I didn't watch a lot of TV as a kid, but I do remember. So I think I was in middle school during the Gulf War, the original Gulf War, and of course it was talked about then. So.
What sparked your interest in joining the military?
So I was a little bit older when I joined the military, and I had been working for a while, and I just felt like I needed to do something to serve my country and challenge myself, and so that's when I decided to join the Navy.
What was your job before joining the military?
I was a warehouse manager for a maintenance supply company. So.
How old were you when you entered service?
I was 30 years old.
What was your family's reaction to you joining?
They had a mixed reaction. As I said, I was already 30. I had a established life already, and so it was a little bit surprising to them. And it was the middle of, Afghanistan war, so there were some obvious consequences to my decision. So.
What was your training like? Was it hard?
Some of it, I think for me, being a civilian for a while before I joined the military, the adjustment to being told what to do all the time was probably a little bit harder than if you go in when you're 18 or 19 years old. So.
Was your training any different than the training for males?
Not that I know of. I'm sure that the standards are different, but as far as the training, we all did the same things, but the physical fitness test standards are different.
What branch of military were you in?
I'm in the Navy. I'm a reservist right now.
Mm-hmm. Did you progress in your rank during your service? How far did you go?
Yeah, so I went in as an 01 officer, the lowest officer ranks, and I'm an 03, so I've made it a couple rungs.
Do you remember any people from your service?
In Afghanistan.
Yeah, absolutely. I made some really good friendships there. I talk to some of those people still every week. It was a very good group of people, and I made a lot of friends.
Nice. Did anyone influence you in your service? If so, whom? Why?
A lot. I've had the pleasure of serving with some really great people. I had a XO in Afghanistan who I worked for, and he was a very, very good man and very fair. And I learned a lot from even having been out in the real world for a while. He always impressed me with his fairness, and I always remember him for that. So.
While you were in Afghanistan, did you travel to any places, like any specific spots?
So we were in Coast City, Afghanistan, which is near the Pakistan border. And we mainly stayed there. I did get to go on a couple trips north to the mountains for some special projects, but for the most part, you didn't have to go far, and you didn't really want to go far. On the way to and from, I went to Kyrgyzstan on the way in, and on the way out, we went through Kuwait. So.
What did you do in the military?
I'm a supply officer, so basically responsible for making sure that everybody has food and a place to sleep, all the vehicles, ammunitions, equipment, supplies, uniforms, everything that they need.
Did you ever have any issues when supplying people? Were there any like shortages, or did anyone not get what they needed?
I'd like to think that everybody got some version of what they needed. Probably not exactly what they wanted. Sure. I mean, anytime you're in a third world environment, you're going to run into issues. By the time I was in Afghanistan, things were pretty established. So, for that reason, we usually had everything we needed, but there was a lot of creativity involved in getting what you needed to do your job.
Was there a major issue that you maybe remember?
Mostly it came around funding. So in 2012, the funding for the war had gotten significantly cut. They were doing some drawbacks. So you didn't always have all the money that you wanted to get everything you wanted. And so that caused you to... We did a lot of trading, bartering with other units. What do I have that you want and what do you have that I want? And usually you ended up with what you needed.
Was your job hard?
Yes. It was hard because it was nonstop. You pretty much worked all the time. You slept, but there wasn't a lot of breaks, so you kind of just, it was like working for 10 months straight.
Did you ever want to feel like that you wanted to just like stop and like go home?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's not like being home at all. It's almost like being on another planet. So there's plenty of times where you kind of just want to be like, okay, I'm done. This was fun. Now I want to go home, but that's not the way it works. So you stay.
Are there any striking memories from your days when you in Afghanistan?
There was a lot of hard things that happened there, and I think I was surprised sometimes at how much fun we could have, even though there was a lot of hard things going on. So there was in things that you wouldn't think that you could have that much fun with at home, right? So we could play darts for hours or frisbee for hours. If you ask me when the last time I sat around and played darts for 5 hours was here in the U.S., I'd tell you it's been years. But there was nothing else to do, and you didn't want to sit around and think about everything else that was going on, so you just went and did goofy stuff for a long time.
Did you ever communicate with friends and family, and how often?
I did. At that time, I used a lot of email. We had kind of intermittent internet. We did have internet, but it wasn't good enough to chat. There was some chat things in 2012, Yahoo Messenger and a couple other things. But mostly I emailed, and then usually twice a month I would call home and do a little update. But you kind of get to the point where you feel like you're telling the same thing over and over again. So it's hard to communicate sometimes.
Did you ever forget to call home once a month?
I think maybe not forget, but I kind of just probably didn't want to disappoint them by not having a lot to talk about. So sometimes I think I probably pushed it off. Yeah.
Were there on social media, if you're trying to contact them, were there restrictions over there that are different from here?
Normally, no. However, we were on a base that had a combat support hospital, so all of the casualties in the area went through that hospital, and if there was a death, they would put the base on blackout, which meant there was no email communication for as long as it took to, properly contact that person's family and let them know. So that sometimes it was just a few hours, but usually it was a day or two, and nobody complained because it was a good reason. You don't want anybody to find those kinds of things out on social media.
Yeah.
So.
Is there anything else that we feel like we should talk about for Afghanistan? Because I feel like there could be more, maybe.
I think probably what struck me the most as being, in my 30s by the time I got there was, there was a lot of young kids there, 18, 19, 20, and this was their first experience in the world. I mean, besides whatever job they had in high school. And that has to be a big deal. I mean, you don't necessarily go into that at that age with all the tools that you need to process everything that happens. So probably one of the biggest things impacts on me was that, you know, just they were so young, and it was kind of a crazy place to be when you're that young. And all great men, you know, but still kids. You know, they were still kids.
For like the age that were like mainly joined, were there a lot more men than women, or was it balanced? Or
No, way more men. So in my compound, there was about 96 people in my unit that I was attached to on that base, and there was 5 women, and one of them was an interpreter. So there was 4 military and one interpreter.
did any women get like picked on or like discriminated solely because of their gender?
No, I don't. You know, people have asked me that question a lot for obvious reasons, but I've always been treated very respectfully. I will tell you, I think there's a lot of overprotective. You know, guys always want to protect you. They always want to, you know, no, LT, you know, we got this. So if anything, there's, you know, I think if you're a female who was hypersensitive to, you know, I want to make sure I do everything for myself, that could bother you. But I tried to take it for what it was, which is, you know, someone's looking out for you, and just let them.
Did you ever feel intimidated because of the age difference? Like, was everyone like really young, or were there like people around your age too?
There were some people my age, but most of them definitely outranked me and were farther along in their military career. So I think that was just frustrating for me because people tend to treat young people a certain way. And when in the military, everything is about the rank that you wear on your chest. You know, nobody knows you. So when they see you, they see your name and they see your rank. And they make assumptions about you because of that. And when you're a lower ranking person, enlisted or officer, the assumption is going to be you don't know anything. And you're going to get treated like you don't know much. Right or wrong, that's the way it is. I try not to treat people like that because I know how it feels. And I try to kind of go along the assumption until you prove otherwise to me. No matter what you're wearing for rank, I'm going to assume that you have a brain in your head and you can use it. So.
Along with that, were there any discrimination or like different treatment because of the age? Like, were you treated more strict because you were older, or were the people that were younger treated like less? Like,
you know, I think the military is pretty good about maintaining a certain like minimum level for anybody, no matter what. But you know, you're obviously trying to keep up with people who are, you know, 10, 12, 15 years younger than you. And that can be a challenge. And I don't know if I would call it discrimination, but, you know, you have to keep in mind you're being compared to people who've got a little bit of a youthful advantage on you.
Or maybe older people who still have a ton of experience under their wing.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
How did your family react when you returned from Afghanistan?
Well, they were happy. I think everybody kind of wants to see you all at once. I think it's really foreign to people, you know, so they don't really understand. And we all watch the news, so we kind of know the typical stereotypes and assumptions that you have about some, you know, when people come back from that kind of experience. And most of them are true. I mean, everybody goes through kind of an adjustment period. But they were happy, and, you know, you got to kind of do your best to try to make everybody happy, but your bandwidth for people is sometimes smaller than what they want. So you got to work through that.
This might sound hypocritical, but did everyone want to know what happened when you returned from your experience?
Yeah. I think so. Although I think at that point, you know, it was kind of out there that maybe people don't want to tell you, you know, who they shot and what they did,
Yeah.
and you know that stuff needs to come out in time. So I didn't have too much of that. I would say probably when I went back to work, to my civilian job, I got more of that. But my family was they waited until I was ready to talk, and then we talked.
Were you relieved when you returned?
Yes and no. I was obviously relieved to come back to civilization and to the real world. But it was very hard. It's hard to make those transitions back to, when you're in an environment that's so restrictive, your brain very quickly programs itself to a limited decision-making process, right? So you don't get to pick what you eat. You don't get to pick, where you work. You deal with what's given to you, and you don't just come home and all of a sudden like, oh yeah, I can just eat whatever I want and do whatever I want, and I'm fine with it. It's kind of, so there's a part of it that's not a relief, because you're sort of like, it's almost like learning how to be a normal person again, and it takes you hopefully 18 years to learn how to be a normal person to begin with, or a functioning person. Normal is probably a bad word. So there was parts of it that were relief, and parts of it that were frustrating.
Do you ever like still act like you're in the military? Well, I mean, since you still are, I mean, like, do you act like you were when you were over there? Like, are you more organized, or like?
Thankfully, they can't see everything around them, but I think I've picked up some good organizational habits in general, and I kind of resort to them when I need some comfort, because that gives you, and I am a reservist, so once a month and 3 or 4 weeks a year I go and I get back into the groove, and I enjoy it.
What goes through your head when you think of Afghanistan now?
I think it doesn't seem like we kind of made good on all the sacrifices that we made over there. I don't regret the experience, but it definitely changed me and made me a little bit of a more introverted person, a little bit more contemplative, and that's good and bad. But as far as what do I think about, I would say 80% of what we did I'm proud of, and 20% I don't think I'll ever understand exactly what we were getting at.
Would you have done anything differently, like yourself, when you were over there?
I think I underestimated for a while, how worried my family was. And you asked the question before about did I ever forget. I think a lot of times I thought only about what felt better for me, and I didn't think about what might have felt better for them while I was away, which probably would have been a few more phone calls a month and putting a little more effort into that. So I tried to do better at that this past year when I was in Africa. So I would do that different, because I think it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You don't realize that people are worried about you, and you just kind of go on your own way. So,
what do you currently do now?
Right now, I'm working for down at Naval Station Newport for one of the divisions there, doing some project support, and I'm still a reservist.
What do you like about the Navy?
I like the support system that I have. I do like that I have a lot of opportunities. There's always, some kind of challenge if you're willing to put in the time. And I think that professionally it's helped me grow as a person, and I'm grateful for that.
What do you do, like, out of your work? Well, do you have another job besides being a naval reservist? No.
Just the job at the Naval Station. I'm a civilian that works at the Naval Station, yeah. So that's what I do outside of the reserves.
What do you do outside of work?
I like to. I'm an outdoorsy person. I like the beach. I like to hike. I bought this old house so I can do some home improvement projects, because that's something that I've always taken a lot of pleasure in. So those are my short list of hobbies. And read.
What books do you like?
So I'm a big suspense person. I like suspense books. I've gotten recently into reading some history and some biographies. While I was in Africa, I accidentally bought a 500-plus page biography of Winston Churchill, and then I forced myself to read it. And it was actually really, really good. But I never would have, I thought it was small, but it turned out it took me a couple months. But yeah, I do enjoy reading some history.
What were your experiences while you were in Africa?
In Africa, our unit was responsible for training the militaries of the countries in East Africa. So we were doing some training projects. And so the good thing about that was I got to go and see some countries that I probably never would have gone to. Ethiopia, Kenya, and then I was in Djibouti. I didn't get out much in Djibouti because the base is pretty big and you don't leave. But I got to see some beautiful country that I probably wouldn't have got to see otherwise. So it was kind of neat.
Did you meet anyone while you were in those African countries?
Well, I mean, besides military people, in Kenya, I got to meet a lot of business people. And also in Ethiopia, I did some audits and I got to meet some Ethiopian folks who ran small airline companies. So that was really neat because I was surprised at the level of professionalism. I think when we think of Africa, we think of, very primitive people who don't know how to run businesses, but that's very far from the truth. They've got a very European style of doing business, and they all speak English and they know what they're doing. So it was really interesting.
Do you think the way that we see Africa on TV as like a poor country, do you think that's true, or do you think that it's better than people make it out to be?
I think Africa has a really high level of corruption, and no matter how, and their governments just aren't strong enough to fight that. So I think, yeah, if your image of Africa is something that's really primitive and backwoods, that's probably wrong. However, they have a long way to go because their governments aren't strong like what you see in the U.S. and Europe as far as fighting the internal bad guys. So.
What was your favorite location overall while you were in Africa?
Kenya. Coastal Kenya is beautiful, and it's a lot like Cape Cod. It's probably a lot like Cape Cod maybe 60 or 70 years ago. It's, sandy, and people are really nice, and it's just a beautiful place. Unfortunately, there's a lot of crime, and so they suffer because the tourism has dropped off in the last 10 years. So it would be a lot like if there was a lot of crime on Cape Cod and people stopped coming to visit. It really hurts the local economy.
Do you have any other questions you want to ask?
Can't really think of any.
All right. Well, you guys had good questions.
Oh.
I hope you got what you needed.
Thank you very much for taking the time to do this interview with us.
Yeah.
Thanks. It means a lot.
Well, I hope you guys do well on your project and, enjoy. Yeah, I mean, hopefully you see a lot of different perspectives. Will you get to watch other people's videos?
Yeah, I think so.
We get to watch them, but I'm not sure how much of them. We might see like a little snippet because there's like 12 people in our class alone, so that's probably at least 3 hours worth of videos.
Yeah. Well, some people worked with partners.
Yeah, so probably around like 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah.
Probably.
It would.
That's a lot of video. But maybe you can pick a few and see what other people have to say. It'd probably be pretty neat. All right.
Cool to see some other people's stories.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Am I still on video?